In this video, we're going to talk about creating panels in your UI and a little bit about what anchor points are so that you can set up your UI a little bit nicer. If you need to set up your canvas and you're not quite sure how to do that, there is a previous video called Setting Up Your Canvas. I'm going to assume that you've already worked through that video and you have a canvas ready to go. So as far as creating panels and what they're good for, to create a panel, we are just going to right click on our canvas in our hierarchy, go to UI and choose panel. This will pop up a semi-transparent, usually, it's a whitish in color, and it should be a child of your canvas. Something to keep in mind with UI elements is they always need to be children of a canvas. You can tell that they're children because if we click this little arrow button, it hides it. If for some reason you did create it outside of the canvas, notice our panel did disappear. So if you create something and it's outside the canvas or it accidentally gets moved, you can just click and drag and drop it back in on that canvas so that it'll start working again. So a couple things about this. When you're working with UI elements, usually you do not want to mess with this scale. That's not how you want to change the size of it. What you do want to use is up here this rect tool right here, not the scale tool, the rect tool, so that you can hover over the corner of things and change the size of it. Notice that it's changing these numbers right here rather than the numbers down here. So this is a better way to change the size of your panels. So so we can make this any size that we need, but it does need to stay, if we want to see it in our game window, it does need to stay the size of, inside of our canvas. That skybox is really distracting too. So let's kind of fix that first. So we don't see that skybox in the back. The easiest way to fix that is going to be to go to your main camera where it says clear flags. You want to change it from skybox to solid color. And notice with the main camera selected, we do get a camera preview of what that camera is seeing. So we can kind of see, it was skybox, solid color. And if you do want to change that background color, you can click on this color swatch and choose whatever color that you want. I'm fine with this blue. I think that'll work fine for what we're doing. So now if I go to game window, I can see that it's a little bit easier to see. So a couple things with this panel. Obviously, if we use the rect tool, we can change the size of it. We can also change the color of it. So let me kind of get it in the middle. And if we go to this color right here, we get that same color wheel. So let's say that we wanted it to be maybe, well, let's say we want, we can choose whatever color we want. But what if we did want it white, but we didn't want it quite so transparent? That's just this A letter down here. It stands for, RGBA, red, green, blue, and alpha. Alpha just means how transparent it is. And it's kind of sort of closer to being fully transparent. If we pull it all the way to the left, notice that it completely disappears. And if we pull it all the way to the right, it's fully opaque. So if you do want a fully opaque panel, just affect that A down there. And if we go over here, we now get a nice white box that is, we don't see through it. We can make as many panels as we want. I do suggest that you do change your names on these. Like if this might just be like my main panel up here, so we'll call it main, not mail, sorry. Main panel. And maybe like this is where we're going to put like our title or something like that, or our main information. We could then create a new panel. And we'll resize it. we do get some nice guides. Notice we're getting some, it kind of, if you're doing it along, it should be kind of snapping so that it kind of fits the same. We could even do a different color with this one. Like maybe this one is more of like a golden orange color for some reason. It'll look nice against that blue, just to kind of contrast it a bit. But we can make as many panels as we want, but I do suggest naming these something useful that makes sense, so they're easier to find in your hierarchy if you're trying to select them. The other thing I did want to talk a little bit about is going to be pivot points. I'm sorry, anchor points. And all these are for is where UI objects are going to move from if things that it's apparent to changes shape. So for instance, if I go back to my game window, I'm gonna, you shouldn't do this. You should always keep it on this, but this will help kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about. If I go to my free aspect, notice how everything kind of flip-flopped around and it got a little bit messed up. And actually, never mind. A better way to, let me put it back on standalone. A better way to show how this would work is going to be to just use these panels. So let's pretend that main panel is a child of orange panel. So I just dragged that on there, and this will be a good way to demonstrate anchor points. So I'm actually going to move this main panel down, and I'm going to resize it so it looks like it's supposed to be in there as like maybe like a highlight up there. And the way that main panel is currently anchored to orange panel is the stretch one. So that means if I go to its parent, which is orange panel, and I start adjusting it, it's going to stretch out main panel to kind of stay consistent with that. That's what the stretch one means. But what if I anchored it, rather than a stretch, to the left corner? That's what all of these mean, like the left corner, the middle, top, right, upper corner, right, middle, bottom, right, etc., etc. What if I anchor it up here? And we can see that this moved into the upper left corner. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. I need to do it to the main panel, not the orange panel. Let's try that again. Upper left, there we go. Notice that it goes to the upper left of the orange panel. That's why I could tell that this one messed up, because this one is now anchored, the orange panel is now anchored to the upper left of the whole canvas, and that's fine. If you did that, that's fine. Main panel anchored to the upper left of the orange. So now if we were to scale the orange panel, if I scale it on the right, nothing changes, because it's just trying to stay a consistent distance that from where this anchor point is. So if we move this side, it doesn't care. Look what happens though if we start moving this left side of it. The main panel is following that corner. So if we move it down here, it doesn't care. If we move this way, it's following it. If we move this way, it follows it. And that's kind of the basics of anchor points, is they're meant to set up so that if whatever it's parented to, notice even if I make it too small, it's just kind of following that corner. So you usually want to make sure that you're anchoring things to correct places. And you're usually going to be setting anchors to, like, usually you put like UI elements inside of a panel or to the canvas itself. So if the canvas changes size or shape, it's going to move it around based on where you set the pivot. It's not always going to be the upper left. Like we could go back to that main panel and pivot it to, bottom left, so that if this moves, it's following it. Let me just make another UI element just real quick to kind of also show that, because you probably would want things potentially anchored in different spots. So like let's say we have something down in this corner. Let me just make it brighter. I'll put another one in the other corner too. And we'll keep this one up here. So this top one, this main panel, I'm actually going to anchor to this upper center. This one I'm going to anchor to the bottom left. This one I would want to anchor probably to the bottom right. You can anchor things to the center too, so you know, don't feel like you have to do it along an edge. But just to kind of show what's going to happen, middle, bottom left, bottom right. So let's start moving this orange panel around. So I pull it down, and it's kind of staying a little bit better. You know, if we were to resize, you know, from here to here, we would want this to stay consistent this way, this way. That would, we want it to go towards the top, but we would want to kind of have it in the middle. So it is a good practice to set up your anchor points. At least for 113, we do stay a consistent size, so it's not the end of the world to not think about your anchor points too much. But in other classes like 112, 212, 213, etc., you might be having to build to different sizes or different shapes. So it might be a good idea to set some anchor points or just kind of get in the habit of using them. Like let's say we changed this to like a free aspect, and now this one is kind of, it's connected up to that corner. So like let's kind of make it a little bit more obvious. Like let's move it over here, and then let's change our scene, like our canvas size. Oh, it's not going to let me, is it? Free aspect. We'll pop this here. We'll pop back. Notice it's staying that consistent distance when we kind of go back and forth. Like no matter the size, it's kind of staying like a consistent distance away from it. You just need to make sure that you're thinking about your anchor points, and if you're having UI problems, then most likely setting up your anchor points correctly will solve that problem.